Severe weather warnings across southeastern Queensland and northeastern New South Wales. Thunderstorms expected later today. Heavy rainfall for the New South Wales Central Coast, and tropical systems developing both in the Coral Sea and off Western Australia. That S, what we're looking at right now. Conditions across the country are varied. Brisbane S been copping it. 38 degrees with humidity making it feel worse. That warm, sticky air mass has been sitting over southeast Queensland all week. Compare that to Tasmania, where Hobart saw -2 this morning. Frost across parts of the state. That's the sort of temperature contrast we're dealing with. Let me start with what S happening in southeast Queensland and northeastern New South Wales, because there is thunderstorm activity on the cards for later this afternoon and this evening. The Bureau of Meteorology is monitoring a weak southeasterly change that is expected to move through later today, probably around 5 or 6 this arvo. When that change arrives, we could see some stronger thunderstorm development, particularly through the Scenic Rim and the Lockyer Valley. The Granite Belt and Darling Downs are also in the firing line. There is potential for activity to extend over into the Gold Coast hinterland as well. Now, I want to be clear about what we're looking at here. This is not going to be a major outbreak. It's a relatively weak trigger compared to what we've seen in previous months, but it's still worth paying attention to, particularly if you are in those areas I've just mentioned. The main threat from these thunderstorms is going to be heavy rainfall. The convective forecast models are showing that these storms are going to be slow moving. We've got variable winds in the lower levels of the atmosphere, meaning these systems want to be tracking quickly. When thunderstorms move slowly, they dump a lot of rain in a concentrated area. That is the primary concern. Damaging wind gusts are possible. The southeasterly change will bring wind gusts pushing close to 60 kilometres per hour in some locations, but it's not the strongest change we've seen. The convective available potential energy, which is the instability in the atmosphere that we use to gauge potential hail size, is sitting between 1,500 and 2,000. That S, not massive, but for late January, it S half decent. We could be looking at hailstones between 3 to 5 centimetres. Yesterday, northeastern New South Wales copped some pretty big stones, around 5 to 6 centimetres. Today, S numbers are a bit lower, so we're not expecting quite the same size, but there's still an outside chance of some localised giant hailstones through the Scenic Rim. The risk is minimal, but at S there. For those in Brisbane, you will likely see some shower activity and possibly the odd thunderstorm moving through tomorrow as well. The southeasterly flow that kicks up tonight will push showers inland, potentially as far as Warwick by tomorrow afternoon and evening. There is a bit of convective available potential energy that increases the risk of thundery downpours tomorrow morning and into early afternoon, especially around the Brisbane metro area. We may also see some accumulations of small hailstones late morning into early afternoon tomorrow. Keep an eye on that. Beyond that, Monday brings a return to calmer conditions across southeast Queensland. Limited shower and thunderstorm activity is expected, just the possibility of a shower here and there for coastal regions. Tuesday is similar. Wednesday, things return to a bit more of a stormy pattern as a trough sets itself up further inland. Thursday, Friday and Saturday, we under the influence of a high-pressure ridge building offshore into the Tasman Sea, which means conditions remain calmer through the southeast coast. So the pattern is a couple more thunderstorms today and tomorrow, then a few showers, maybe another thunderstorm midweek, and then calmer conditions return for the end of the week and potentially out towards next weekend. Now let's talk about the New South Wales Central Coast, because there's significant rainfall expected there over the next 24 to 48 hours. Right now, there's a weak low-pressure system situated offshore from the central coast of New South Wales. It is tracking northeast. Throughout today, we were going to see heavy showers and thunderstorms streaming into this part of the coastline. The Hunter region is already seeing some activity. Rainfall accumulations between 40 to 80 millimetres are expected, increasing to 120 millimetres in a few spots, particularly into exposed coastal locations such as Nelson Bay, Newcastle, and as far north as Kempsey and Port Macquarie. The Barrington tops may exceed 100 millimetres as well. This is rainfall coming out of that southeasterly pattern, getting jammed up against the coastline throughout the afternoon and evening. Showers will move progressively more north throughout the remainder of today and into tomorrow, where the heaviest rainfall is expected around the Forster and Port Macquarie area. In terms of flooding or flash flooding risk, it is pretty minimal right now. I am not expecting anything too dramatic. Earlier in the week, some forecast models were showing some pretty wild numbers, but they've since backed off. We're not looking at 500 or 600 millimetres. We never were, to be honest. For that sort of rainfall to occur, we'd need a very strong low pressure system, and we just don't have that. You'd be hard pressed to really detect where this low pressure system is right now, just based on the satellite imagery, because it is such a weak and messy system. Wind observations support that as well. 25 knots gusting 35 at Sydney Airport, 22 knots at Montague Island Lighthouse north of Bega. Nothing special, not supportive of a strong low pressure system. Right, let's turn our attention to the tropics because there are a couple of significant developments that need monitoring. First, the situation across northern Australia. We've got the remnants of ex-tropical cyclone Koji around the Darwin area. That air's bringing very heavy rainfall to Darwin and especially through coastal locations around the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf throughout the remainder of today. The monsoon trough is still pretty weak across the Northern Territory and into the Kimberley region of Western Australia. A lot of the monsoonal activity has moved away from North Queensland, which means rainfall is going to reduce significantly over the next couple of days across that region. That LL give rivers time to drop, which is very good news considering the significant flooding that is ongoing, particularly in northwestern Queensland and into the central coalfields and highlands. Now, tropical low 14U is spinning itself up quite nicely in the Coral Sea. It's got a nice central dense overcast, which is that cluster of thunderstorms around the storm centre. The monsoonal flow in the Solomon Sea around the Solomon Islands, heading over towards Vanuatu and New Caledonia, is feeding the system. This system is expected to make a U-turn, bypassing New Caledonia and then heading towards Norfolk Island and eventually off towards New Zealand. No threat to either of those locations, although New Caledonia may get cyclonic force winds early next week, depending on how the system develops. In terms of a Queensland threat, this system is not expected to approach Queensland in any meaningful capacity. It's not going to come within about 1,500 kilometres of the Queensland coastline. That is good news. Queensland does not need another tropical cyclone right now. Looking ahead 5 to 6 days, we're expecting something to develop around the Cape York Peninsula. That is likely to move out into the Coral Sea, where development is expected to occur. We're likely to see a tropical low offshore from the north and far north Queensland coast. Let me walk through the forecast for this Coral Sea system because it is the one that is more likely to impact populated areas. Throughout the remainder of this weekend, we're expecting an enhancement in shower and thunderstorm activity that really begins to pick up through the Cape York Peninsula as we head into next week. Significant rain accumulations are expected on the western edge of Cape York around the Gulf of Carpentaria, with heavy showers and thunderstorms at times through Tuesday and Wednesday across much of the peninsula. This is where we're expecting the tropical low to begin development either in the Gulf of Carpentaria or out in the Coral Sea. It's likely to develop sometime around Tuesday or Wednesday next week. That will translate to isolated areas of very heavy rainfall through Cape York and potentially down into the Daintree rainforest and maybe even the Cassowary coast as well. The future of this system remains relatively uncertain. It's heavily dependent on where the monsoon trough sets itself up. We're likely to see this system head out into the Coral Sea with a general southeasterly motion expected. That means if it does get out into the Coral Sea, which is very likely now, it's actually going to pull away from the Queensland coastline as it intensifies. Queensland impacts are expected to be pretty minimal if they even occur at this point. Of course, things can change. That is why we monitor these situations closely. But right now, this is not a major concern for Queensland in any way, shape or form. Some of the more aggressive ensemble models are showing this storm making a bit of a turn towards Queensland before turning away. Either way you cut it, it's not expected to make landfall as a tropical cyclone in the next week or so. We may be talking about some periods of heavy rainfall through the far north Queensland coastline, but I'm pretty uncertain on this right now, considering the system is actually pulling away from Queensland rather than drawing towards the coastline. A couple of forecast runs ago, we were talking about a system similar in size to Tropical Cyclone Koji, which was huge. Right now, I am leaning towards a slightly smaller and slightly more organised system. Now, Western Australia, this is the one that requires very close attention. We could be talking about a pretty significant system offshore from Western Australia. There is a lot of moisture in the atmosphere around the Joseph Bonaparte Gulf, and this weekend is going to bring significant rainfall through parts of the top end of the Northern Territory, particularly the northwest coast around Darwin. Looking at 7-day rainfall accumulations, maximum numbers around the Darwin area are between 200 to 500 millimetres, increasing closer to the coastline and getting up towards 4, 5, 6 or even 700 millimetres. Offshore, because of the stagnant nature of this low pressure system, massive rainfall accumulations become a possibility. The general trend with the forecast models keeps the highest rainfall totals over 1,500 millimetres far enough offshore that they are not a concern for the Northern Territory coastline. Plus, the majority of this rainfall, regardless of how the system develops, is expected to be coastal based, which means flooding is not expected to be a major problem. However, for those in the northwest, particularly between Darwin down to about Kununurra or Wyndham along the coastline, expect to be cut off for a prolonged period. Anywhere more than 200 or 300 millimetres in these areas will cause damage to the road network, particularly unsealed roads. Significant rises to river levels can be expected, but access should be restored by late next week towards early next weekend. If you live outside of Darwin, but south of Darwin, down towards Kununurra and Wyndham, plan ahead. Prepare to be cut off for a prolonged period if you've got dirt road access. Sealed roads shouldn't be a problem unless there's flooding, which isn't expected to be a significant concern right now, but I'll keep tabs on that. The forecast for this system has changed a bit from yesterday. The European model is taking the system into the Kimberley region and then having it hug the West Australian coastline through next week during its formative stages. Over the last couple of days, we've been seeing this system head out into the Indian Ocean and then make a U-turn back down towards Western Australia towards the end of next week. This system isn't expected to get anywhere near Indonesia, but it's expected to remain far enough offshore that significant intensification remains a possibility. With the current forecast track, it kind of hugs the coastline before potentially diving inland. That's definitely something we need to keep close watch on. Whether this system is going to hug the Kimberley coastline or the Pilbara coastline matters. If it does hug the coast, we'll obviously be talking about a much weaker and less dangerous tropical cyclone threat. But if this system takes a more west-south-westerly motion and then makes a sharp turn into the Kimberley or Pilbara coastline by the end of next week, we could be talking about a very high-end severe tropical cyclone impact, anywhere from Category 3 up towards Category 5. My advice to people between Broome down to about Exmouth, including Karratha, Onslow and Port Hedland and other adjacent communities, particularly those within about 100 kilometres of the coastline, watch this space very closely. There is no immediate tropical cyclone threat right now, but one may be developing in the next couple of days. The more reliable forecast models are suggesting the system will remain on that further offshore track, which does mean a much more significant tropical cyclone impact is a possibility. But details are still pretty unclear, and we've had some inconsistencies between the models this morning. Some of the major forecast models are showing quite aggressive scenarios. One model is showing a cyclone Vance type situation with a system around 928 to 930 hectopascals going towards Exmouth. We'd be looking at winds well in excess of 250 kilometres per hour. That would flatten Exmouth. It gives you an idea that if something does get offshore, it won't have much standing in its way, and a very significant tropical cyclone remains a possibility. To sum up, thunderstorms for southeast Queensland and northeastern New South Wales later today. Heavy rainfall for the New South Wales Central Coast over the next day or so. A tropical low developing in the Coral Sea next week that's likely to pull away from Queensland, and a potentially significant tropical cyclone threat developing off Western Australia by the end of next week. For southeast Queensland, the main threat today is slow-moving thunderstorms with heavy rainfall. Some hail is possible. Tomorrow brings more showers and possibly some thundery activity, particularly around Brisbane. Then we settle down from Monday onwards. For the New South Wales Central Coast, heavy rainfall today and tomorrow, particularly around Newcastle, Port Macquarie and the Barrington Tops. Flooding risk is minimal. For North Queensland, the tropical low developing next week is expected to stay offshore and pull away from the coast. Minimal impacts expected. For Western Australia, particularly the Pilbara and Kimberley regions, this is one to watch very closely. By the end of next week, there is potential for a significant tropical cyclone impact. No immediate threat, but start paying attention now. That's the situation as it stands. I'll be monitoring these tropical systems closely and providing updates as the forecast evolves. Stay safe, stay informed, and don't panic. These are significant weather events, but with proper preparation and attention,